I discovered my husband brought his secret mistress to our engagement anniversary dinner. But when he introduced her as his new colleague, I smiled warmly, because I'd already planned to introduce her to her own fiancé who was sitting 3 tables away. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is equally powerful. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. The notification lit up my phone at 9:23 p.m. on Friday night, right in the middle of our 5th engagement anniversary celebration at Harborview Bistro in Crescent Bay. A photo tagged by my cousin Lydia showed my husband Derek laughing with a striking blonde woman in a navy blue dress. Their body language was intimate, familiar, the kind that made my chest tighten. The caption read, "Derek and his colleague Amber at the Thompson celebration. Such great work friends." Work friends. I stared at the screen while conversations hummed around our reserved section of the restaurant. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across 50 of our closest friends and family members. Everyone was celebrating 5 years since Derek proposed to me on the pier at Sunset Point. Meanwhile, my husband was across the room with a woman I'd never heard him mention, looking more relaxed and genuinely content than I'd seen him in months. I recognized her immediately from the photo, even though Derek had never introduced us. She stood near the appetizer station, elegant and confident, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my car payment. Her laugh carried across the dining area as she chatted with our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson from Maple Ridge Avenue. She looked completely at ease, as if she belonged here, as if she had every right to be celebrating my engagement anniversary. My hand stayed steady as I slipped my phone back into my evening bag. No shaking, no dramatic gasps. Instead, something cold and calculating settled deep in my chest. I began moving through the party with fresh eyes, observing Derek's interactions with this Amber person. The way he refilled her wine glass without being asked. How he subtly steered her away from certain groups of people. The careful physical distance he maintained in public while his eyes constantly tracked her movements across the room. This wasn't their first social event together. Their comfort level screamed practice, previous gatherings where they'd perfected this performance of casual workplace acquaintances. I thought back to Derek's recent company events that I'd supposedly been too busy to attend. The quarterly networking dinners, the department retreats, the holiday galas where he claimed +1s weren't really expected. How many of those events had featured Amber? I excused myself from a conversation with Derek's college roommate and walked toward the restroom, pulling out my phone to do what any suspicious wife would do in 2024, social media investigation. Amber's profile appeared within seconds once I had her first name and face. Amber Dalton, Senior Project Coordinator at Nexus Digital Solutions, the same tech company where Derek worked as operations manager. Her Instagram told a story of professional success, luxury travel, and expensive lifestyle choices. But it was the subtle details that caught my attention. A coffee cup from Riverside Roasters on Harbor Street, the exact place Derek claimed to grab his morning espresso. A sunset photo from Ocean View Park taken 4 weeks ago, the same evening Derek texted about working late on a system upgrade. A picture of craft cocktails from the Sterling Lounge posted last Tuesday when Derek mentioned an emergency client video call. I scrolled back through months of posts, constructing a timeline in my mind. The overlaps were damning. Every supposed late work session, every weekend emergency, every unexplained absence had a corresponding post from Amber in identical locations around Crescent Bay. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. The most revealing evidence came from a group photo posted by Nexus Digital Solutions 3 weeks ago, their annual team retreat at Pinewood Mountain Resort. There was Derek in the back row, and there was Amber, positioned strategically several people away, but both wearing matching company hoodies and identical expressions. The kind of smiles people share when they have secrets. I leaned against the marble sink in the ladies' room, processing this information while party music drifted through the walls. 5 years since Derek proposed under the stars at Sunset Point. 5 years of building a life together, supporting his career transitions, believing his stories about demanding projects and difficult clients. How long had this been going on? How many lies had I accepted while playing the supportive partner? The restroom door opened and my sister Caroline walked in carrying empty dessert plates. Amazing party, Rachel. You really outdid yourself with the venue choice. She paused, studying my reflection in the mirror. Everything okay? You look a bit pale. Just checking on the cake delivery timing, I lied smoothly, tucking my phone away. Making sure we have enough for everyone. Caroline nodded and headed back out, but her comment about guest count triggered something important in my mind. I had planned this party for 50 people. I had personally created the guest list, coordinated every RSVP, managed every single detail. Amber Dalton was not on my list. So how exactly had she ended up at my engagement anniversary celebration? I walked to my evening bag where I'd stored the printed guest list. Scanning through names alphabetically confirmed what I already suspected. No Amber anywhere. Which meant Derek had invited her separately, probably told her it was a casual company mixer or networking event. He'd brought his mistress to our anniversary party and was introducing her as a colleague to our friends and family. The audacity was breathtaking. The calculated deception was even worse. This wasn't a recent mistake or moment of weakness. This was systematic betrayal, carefully orchestrated and flawlessly executed. Derek had been living a double life with the confidence of someone who believed he was too clever to get caught. I returned to the party, moving through conversations with renewed purpose. Now I was observing everyone's interactions with Amber, noting who seemed to know her and who was meeting her for the first time. Our mutual friend Justin from the gym mentioned that Derek had brought up a work colleague to the charity fundraiser at Bayshore Community Center last month. My future mother-in-law commented that she'd met a lovely young woman at Derek's company summer barbecue in August, someone who worked in project coordination. The pieces assembled with sickening clarity. Derek had been gradually introducing Amber into our social circle, testing boundaries, normalizing her presence. Tonight was just his boldest move yet, bringing her to our most intimate celebration and watching her charm our closest friends and family. I found myself standing near the restaurant's terrace doors, watching Derek and Amber from across the candlelit space. They were maintaining perfect professional distance, but their awareness of each other was constant. She laughed at something our friend Robert said, and Derek's head turned immediately toward the sound. He handed someone a drink, but his eyes followed her movement toward the dessert table. They had the unconscious synchronization of people deeply attuned to each other's rhythms. My phone buzzed with another notification, a photo posted by Derek's coworker Nathan showing a group shot from tonight's party. Derek and Amber weren't standing together, but the camera had captured them in an unguarded moment, sharing a look across the crowd that was unmistakably intimate. The kind of look that would seem completely inappropriate between colleagues but spoke volumes about their real relationship. I screenshot the image, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Then I did something that surprised even me. I walked directly toward them, my smile bright and welcoming, my voice carrying clearly across nearby conversations. Amber, isn't it? I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Rachel, Derek's fiancée. I extended my hand warmly, watching her face carefully for any flicker of guilt or discomfort. Derek's mentioned working with the project coordination team, but I don't think he's talked about you specifically. How long have you been with Nexus Digital? Her handshake was firm, her smile perfectly professional, but I caught the slight tension around her eyes. About 18 months now. I work closely with Derek on several regional initiatives. Thank you so much for including me tonight. Your celebration is absolutely beautiful. Of course, I replied, my tone genuinely warm. Any colleague of Derek's is welcome here. Actually, I was just thinking how nice it would be for you to meet some of the other professionals here. My friend Thomas over there, I gestured across the room, his fiancée works in project management too. Small world, right? Derek stepped closer, his hand briefly touching my elbow. Rachel, I don't want to monopolize Amber's evening. I'm sure she'd like to mingle. Absolutely, I agreed, still smiling. In fact, I think I saw someone earlier who might know you, Amber. Let me see if I can find him. I excused myself and walked purposefully toward the bar area, my mind racing. Because I had seen someone earlier. Someone whose presence at this party suddenly made perfect, terrible sense. A silver Audi parked along Harbor Street when we arrived, license plate I'd unconsciously noted. A man in a charcoal suit who'd been seated 3 tables away, dining alone, occasionally glancing toward our celebration with an expression I couldn't quite read. I pulled out my phone and searched for one specific detail from Amber's Instagram, a photo from 2 months ago showing a man's hand wearing a distinctive gold watch with a blue face, tagged with a heart emoji but no name. Then I opened a new search and typed, Amber Dalton Crescent Bay engaged. The results appeared instantly, and my breath caught. An engagement announcement from 8 months ago in the Crescent Bay Chronicle. Amber Dalton and Brian Pierce, planning a spring wedding at Seaside Gardens. Brian Pierce, whose silver Audi was parked outside, who was sitting 3 tables away, who had no idea his fiancée was currently charming my friends while planning a future with my husband. I looked across the restaurant at the man sitting alone, then back at Amber laughing near the dessert table, then at Derek watching her with barely concealed longing. This situation was far more complicated than I'd initially realized. And it was about to become much, much worse for everyone involved. Except for me. Because while Derek worried about maintaining his performance, and Amber concentrated on charming our friends, I was already several steps ahead, my mind cataloging every detail, every connection, every weakness in their carefully constructed deception. The real anniversary celebration was just beginning. It took immense self-control to finish the evening without my carefully constructed composure cracking. The party ended at midnight, but my real work was just beginning. As Derek helped clean up the restaurant's private section, stacking chairs and collecting forgotten jackets, I watched him with new clarity. Every casual comment about how well the evening had gone, every mention of which colleagues had enjoyed themselves, every careful omission of Amber's name despite her obvious presence throughout the night. Great turnout, he said, loading champagne flutes into a catering box. I think everyone had a wonderful time. Even your work people seemed to blend in nicely, I replied, my voice light. That blonde from project coordination, Amber, was it? She seemed lovely. Derek paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing with the glasses. Yeah, she's professional. Good at networking and relationship building. Relationship building. I filed that phrase away with all the other euphemisms he'd probably been using to justify his behavior. We drove home to our townhouse in Willowbrook Heights in comfortable silence, but I could sense Derek's tension. He kept glancing at his phone, thumb hovering over the screen before placing it back in the cup holder. Probably wanting to text Amber but unable to while I was right beside him. After Derek fell asleep around 2 a.m., I crept downstairs to our home office with my laptop and a strong cup of coffee. The clock showed 2:47 a.m., but I was wide awake, energized by purpose in a way I hadn't felt in months. I started with what I could access easily and legally, our shared accounts, phone records, credit card statements, and location history. The phone records were immediately revealing. Over the past 8 months, Derek had been making frequent calls to a number I didn't recognize. The calls typically lasted between 20 and 50 minutes, often during his evening commute or late at night when he claimed to be reviewing project proposals in his study. I ran the number through reverse lookup services and found it registered to A. Dalton in the Harborside district. Amber lived 17 minutes from our townhouse, close enough for spontaneous visits, far enough to maintain the illusion of separate lives. The credit card statements painted an even clearer picture. Dinner charges at upscale restaurants in Harborside and downtown Crescent Bay on evenings when Derek claimed to be working late. Hotel charges during supposed business conferences that didn't align with Nexus Digital's actual travel schedule. Purchases from Wellington's fine jewelry on dates that coincided with no special occasions in our relationship. I pulled up our shared digital calendar and began cross-referencing Derek's reported activities with these financial records. The pattern was damning. Every client dinner that appeared on our calendar corresponded to a restaurant charge in Harborside. Every weekend work commitment matched hotel expenses in cities where Nexus Digital had no current projects. But the most telling evidence came from Derek's own digital footprint. His location services, which he'd forgotten were linked to our shared family account, told a story of regular visits to addresses in Harborside, extended stays at locations that weren't his office, and frequent stops at places like Ocean View Park and Riverside Roasters that he'd never mentioned to me. I opened a new document and began building a comprehensive timeline. The earliest evidence I could find dated back 11 months, a dinner charge at Giovanni's Italian kitchen on a Tuesday evening when Derek had texted me about a last-minute systems crisis. That same evening, Amber had posted an Instagram story featuring handmade pasta and expensive wine, geotagged at the exact same restaurant. 11 months. Nearly a year of systematic deception, careful planning, and elaborate lies. This wasn't a recent affair or a moment of weakness. This was a parallel relationship, complete with routines, traditions, and probably anniversaries they were celebrating while I planned parties for an engagement that had apparently become meaningless to him. I dove deeper into Amber's social media history, screenshotting posts and archiving images before she could potentially make her accounts private. Her Instagram revealed a woman living significantly above what a project coordinator's salary should support. Designer handbags, luxury spa treatments, weekend getaways to expensive resorts, and dinners at restaurants that charged more for one meal than most people spent on groceries in a week. But her Facebook account provided the most crucial information. Buried in photos from a Nexus digital holiday party 9 months ago, I found a group shot that made my blood run cold. Derek and Amber weren't just standing together, they were positioned as a couple. His arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his chest, both wearing expressions of contentment and belonging. The photo was tagged by multiple Nexus digital employees. Comments included things like, "power couple," and "you two are adorable together," with heart emojis. Derek had responded to several comments, but his replies had been deleted. However, the responses from other people remained, "can't wait for the big announcement," and "save us a spot at the wedding." I sat back in my desk chair, coffee growing cold in my hands as the full scope of Derek's betrayal crystallized. This wasn't just an affair. He was living a completely separate life where he and Amber were an acknowledged couple among his coworkers. While I was home planning our engagement anniversary party, he was attending company events where people expected him to announce his wedding plans, with another woman. I opened a new browser tab and searched more thoroughly for Brian Pierce, the name I'd connected to the silver Audi and Amber's engagement announcement. His LinkedIn profile appeared immediately. Brian Pierce, wealth management consultant at Crestview Financial Group, specializing in estate planning and investment portfolios for high-net-worth clients. His profile photo showed a distinguished man in his mid-30s with dark hair and the kind of confident presence that suggested professional success. His company bio mentioned that he lived in Harborside with his fiancée and that they were active members of the Crescent Bay Yacht Club and the Downtown Business Association. His social media told the story of a couple building a successful life together. Photos from charity events, vacation trips to the Caribbean, anniversary dinners at elegant restaurants. Brian's posts about Amber were filled with genuine affection and pride. Last month's post on their engagement anniversary read, 8 months closer to forever with the most incredible woman I've ever known. Amber makes every day brighter. While he was posting tributes to his fiancée, she was having dinner with my husband at the same restaurants, probably on the same nights. I found their engagement announcement from 8 months ago, complete with photos of a radiant Amber displaying her ring at Sunset Point, the exact location where Derek had proposed to me 5 years earlier. The announcement mentioned that the couple planned to marry next spring at Seaside Gardens and honeymoon in the Greek islands. I dug deeper and discovered something that made the situation even more complicated. 3 years ago, Nexus Digital had collaborated with Crestview Financial Group on a major client project. Derek had been part of the team, which meant he likely knew Brian professionally, had possibly worked alongside him, had built a professional relationship before systematically pursuing his fiancée. I opened our shared photo albums and scrolled back through company events from the past few years. There, in a picture from a Nexus Digital networking mixer 2.5 years ago, was Derek standing in a group that included both Brian and Amber. There he was at a charity golf tournament, paired with Brian for the day while Amber watched from the clubhouse. Photo after photo of Derek integrating himself into their social circle, building trust and familiarity that he would later exploit. But the most damning evidence came from Derek's own devices. While he slept upstairs, I used our shared cloud account to access his message history. The texts between Derek and Amber went back almost a year, starting with professional conversations about project timelines and gradually becoming intensely personal. The progression was textbook emotional affair escalation. Complaints about feeling unappreciated at home, shared frustrations about demanding partners, late-night conversations about dreams and unfulfilled desires. Then came the transition, meeting for coffee, to decompress, followed by dinner meetings that lasted until midnight. The messages from recent months were explicit about their relationship and future plans. Discussions about Derek ending our engagement after tonight's anniversary party. Conversations about Amber breaking her engagement to Brian. Detailed planning for a life together, including apartment hunting in the neighboring city of Baymont, far enough away to start fresh but close enough to maintain their jobs. After this weekend, we can stop hiding, Derek had texted just 4 days ago. The anniversary party will be perfect cover. We'll both have public events to reference while we finalize our real plans. Amber's response was equally chilling. I can't wait to stop lying to Brian about working late. This double life is exhausting, but it'll be worth it when we're finally together openly. They had been using our engagement anniversary party as camouflage for their relationship and as a stepping stone toward destroying both of our commitments. While I carefully planned a celebration of our 5 years together, they were planning its demolition. I printed screenshots of the most damaging messages and organized them chronologically. Then I did something that surprised me with its boldness. I opened a new email account under a pseudonym and began researching Brian Pierce's daily routine through his social media posts and public information. He worked out at Harborside Athletic Club every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6:30 a.m. He had breakfast at Compass Coffee House every morning before heading to his office. He played tennis at the Yacht Club every Sunday morning with a regular group that included his brother, Daniel. Brian Pierce had no idea that his fiancée was planning to leave him or that the colleague he'd welcomed into their professional network was systematically destroying his relationship. But unlike me, he wouldn't have to discover the truth by accident. I was going to make sure he learned everything. And I was going to make sure he learned it in a way that would give him the same advantages I now possessed. Knowledge was power, and I intended to share that power with the one person who deserved it as much as I did. As dawn broke over Crescent Bay, I closed my laptop and headed upstairs. Derek was still sleeping peacefully, probably dreaming about his new life with Amber while lying next to the fiancée he planned to abandon. He looked innocent in sleep, almost like the man who'd proposed to me 5 years ago at Sunset Point, before ambition and selfishness had transformed him into someone capable of such calculated cruelty. But I wasn't the same woman he'd proposed to either. The Rachel who had gone to bed last night after hosting a beautiful anniversary celebration no longer existed. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more strategic. Derek and Amber thought they held all the cards, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated their victim's capacity for intelligence and coordinated response. By the time I was finished with them, they would understand exactly how costly that mistake had been. Monday morning arrived with crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharp and clear. I had spent Sunday researching Brian Pierce's routine, and I knew he would be at Compass Coffee House on Harborside Boulevard at exactly 7:45 a.m., just like he had been every weekday for the past 3 years according to his social media check-ins. Derek left for work at his usual time, kissing my cheek and mentioning something about a full day of meetings ahead. I watched him drive away in his black sedan, probably heading straight to Nexus Digital where he would spend the day maintaining his professional facade while texting his engaged girlfriend. I arrived at Compass Coffee House 30 minutes early, securing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. The cafe was exactly what I'd expected from Brian's Instagram posts, upscale but approachable, with exposed brick walls and the kind of carefully curated modern aesthetic that appealed to Harborside's young professionals. I ordered a cappuccino and opened my laptop, trying to look like any other remote worker starting her day. Brian walked through the door at precisely 7:43 a.m., and I recognized him immediately from his photos. Tall, athletic build, wearing a tailored navy suit that suggested success without pretension. He moved with quiet confidence, nodding to the barista who clearly knew his regular order. Everything about him radiated genuine warmth and stability, qualities that made Derek's deception even more despicable. I watched him collect his coffee and scan the cafe for seating. When his eyes met mine, I offered a careful smile and gestured to the empty chair across from my table. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you might be Brian Pierce." I kept my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My name is Rachel Winters. I believe we have something very important to discuss about our partners." He paused, coffee in hand, his expression shifting from polite confusion to cautious recognition. "Yes, I'm Brian. Do we know each other?" "Not exactly," I replied, turning my laptop screen toward him. The first image was a screenshot from Friday night showing Derek and Amber sharing that intimate look across our anniversary celebration. "This was taken at my engagement anniversary party 3 days ago. Your fiancé was there as my partner's guest." Brian sat down slowly, his professional composure intact but wariness creeping into his eyes. "I'm not sure I understand." Amber mentioned a work event on Friday, a colleague's anniversary celebration. She mentioned that the colleague was engaged and that she spent the evening charming his fiancé's friends and family while maintaining perfect professional distance in public but complete emotional intimacy when she thought no one was watching. I scrolled to the next image, a screenshot from Amber's Instagram story showing her navy dress laid out on a bed, captioned, "Perfect look for tonight's special celebration." The timestamp showed it was posted 3 hours before our party. "Special celebration," Brian repeated quietly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "I have 11 months of evidence suggesting otherwise," I said, my tone gentle but direct. "Credit card statements, location data, text messages, social media posts. Your fiancé and my partner have been having an affair since last fall, and based on their recent communications, they're planning to leave both of us very soon." Brian set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Show me everything." For the next 40 minutes, I walked him through the comprehensive timeline I'd constructed. The restaurant charges that coincided with Amber's Instagram posts. The hotel expenses during Derek's supposed business trips. The company holiday party photos where they appeared as an established couple. The text messages discussing their plans to end both relationships after our anniversary party. Brian listened without interruption, his expression growing harder with each revelation. When I showed him the messages between Derek and Amber discussing their apartment hunting in Baymont and their timeline for leaving us, Brian's professional composure finally showed cracks. "Jesus," he whispered, running his hand through his hair. "I gave him advice on engagement rings last year. I helped him plan a surprise for his fiancé's birthday. I congratulated him on his 5 years together at your party. He attended your engagement celebration 8 months ago," I replied quietly. "He toasted your future together and smiled in photos with you and Amber. Then he spent the next 8 months systematically pursuing your fiancé." Brian leaned back in his chair, processing this information. The working late. The weekend conferences. The sudden interest in professional development seminars. I thought she was just dedicated to advancing her career. He laughed bitterly. I was proud of her ambition. "They've been very careful," I said. "Professional colleagues in public, lovers in private. They've used their work relationship as perfect cover, and they've used our trust against us." "How long have you known?" "Since Friday night during the party. I spent the weekend investigating before approaching you. I wanted to be certain, and I wanted to have complete information before we decided how to handle this." Brian studied my face with new interest. "We? You're assuming I want to work together." "I'm hoping you do," I replied honestly. "They've been planning this together, coordinating their deception, supporting each other through the guilt and lies. Meanwhile, we've been isolated, each dealing with a cheating partner alone. They have the advantage of partnership. I think we should too." He considered this for a moment, his financial consultant's mind clearly analyzing the situation. "What exactly are you proposing?" I closed my laptop and leaned forward. "They think they're so much smarter than us. They think they've planned the perfect exit strategy where they'll surprise both of us with simultaneous revelations and walk off into the sunset together. But they've made mistakes, left evidence, created vulnerabilities. Most importantly, they've underestimated us." "And you want to, what exactly?" Confront them? Expose them publicly? I want to make sure they face appropriate consequences for their choices, I said carefully. Not just the inconvenience of broken engagements, but real accountability for the calculated cruelty they've shown both of us. Brian was quiet for several minutes, sipping his coffee and staring out the cafe window at the morning traffic on Harborside Boulevard. Finally, he spoke. Amber's been different for months. Distant, secretive, always on her phone. When I tried to plan a getaway for our engagement anniversary, she said she was too busy with crucial projects at work. Now I know what those projects really were. Derek's been the same way, I said. I attributed it to career stress, maybe anxiety about our wedding planning. I actually felt sorry for him, tried to be more supportive and understanding. 8 months, Brian said quietly. We've been engaged for 8 months and she's been cheating for almost the entire time. The whole foundation of our relationship has been a lie. 11 months that I can prove, I corrected. But you're right about the foundation. Once trust is broken at this level, there's no rebuilding it. Brian pulled out his phone and scrolled through what I assumed were recent messages from Amber. She texted me yesterday about working late again tomorrow evening. Emergency client presentation, she said. I was going to surprise her with dinner from her favorite restaurant. Derek has a client strategy session tomorrow night too, I replied. Same lie, same evening. They're probably planning their next moves, maybe discussing when and how to tell us they're leaving. The arrogance is what gets me, Brian said, his voice hardening. They've been playing us both for fools while building their relationship on our backs. Using our homes, our emotional support, our financial resources to sustain themselves through their affair. I nodded. Derek used our anniversary party as cover to introduce Amber to our social circle. She charmed our friends and family while planning to destroy our engagement. They turned our celebration into their opportunity. So what do you suggest we do about it? I had been preparing for this question since I decided to approach him. I think we should let them believe they're still in control while we gather more evidence and plan our response. They're expecting us to be devastated victims when they finally reveal their affair. Instead, I think we should be prepared, unified, and several steps ahead of them. You mean we pretend we don't know? I mean we use their own strategy against them. They've been living double lives, maintaining facades while pursuing their real agenda. We can do the same thing, except our real agenda is making sure they face full consequences for their choices. Brian leaned forward, his business instincts clearly engaged. What kind of consequences are you thinking about? Social consequences. Professional consequences. Financial consequences. They want to start a new life together? Fine. But they should start it with everyone knowing exactly how they conducted themselves in their previous relationships. You want to expose them publicly. I want to ensure that the people who matter in their professional and social circles understand what kind of people they're dealing with. Derek works in technology operations where integrity and ethics are supposedly paramount. Amber works in project coordination where reputation matters. Their colleagues, clients, and friends deserve to know how they handle commitments and treat the people who trust them. Brian was quiet for a moment, then asked, what about legally? Broken engagements, asset division, all of that. That's where working together really benefits us both, I said. They've been careless with evidence because they assumed we'd never compare notes. Text messages, financial records, documented patterns of deception. If we coordinate our legal strategies, we can ensure they face appropriate financial consequences for their choices. You've really thought this through. I've had 3 days to think about nothing else. And I've realized something important. They've been planning this systematically for almost a year. They deserve a response that's equally systematic and thorough. Brian finished his coffee and checked his watch. I need to get to my office, but I want to continue this conversation. Are you available to meet again tomorrow? Absolutely. Same time, same place? Actually, he said, standing and straightening his tie, let me give you my personal email address, not the one Amber has access to. I think we should communicate privately while we figure out our next steps. I handed him my business card with my personal contact information. I'd been thinking we should document everything we discover, create a complete timeline of their affair with supporting evidence. The more thoroughly we understand what they've been doing, the better we can respond. Agreed, Brian said. And Rachel, he paused, looking directly at me, thank you for approaching me. I don't know how long I would have stayed blind to this if you hadn't reached out. We both deserve to know the truth, I replied. They certainly weren't going to tell us voluntarily. As Brian left the cafe, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Friday night, hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness, but for justice. Derek and Amber had spent 11 months building their relationship through deception and betrayal. Now Brian and I would spend however long it took building something too, a comprehensive response that would ensure they understood the true cost of their choices. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Brian with all the evidence I'd gathered so far. But more importantly, I started outlining a plan that would give us the same advantages they'd enjoyed: coordination, information, and the element of surprise. They wanted to play games with other people's lives and emotions? Perfect. But this time, they wouldn't be the only ones setting the rules. Over the next 6 days, Brian and I exchanged 23 emails, met 3 times at different locations across Crescent Bay, and constructed what could only be described as a comprehensive intelligence operation. Our communication was methodical, professional, and devastatingly thorough. We used encrypted email accounts, met at locations where neither of our partners would accidentally encounter us, and documented everything with the precision of corporate investigators. Brian brought capabilities I hadn't anticipated. His background in wealth management meant he understood asset protection, legal documentation, and financial forensics. More importantly, his access to professional networks gave us resources I couldn't have accessed alone. Within 4 days, he had quietly retained a private investigator who specialized in relationship infidelity cases and a family law attorney known for aggressive asset protection strategies. The PI discovered something interesting, Brian said during our Thursday morning meeting at Cornerstone Cafe, 30 minutes outside Crescent Bay. He slid a manila envelope across the table. I opened it to find photographs taken with a telephoto lens. Derek and Amber walking hand in hand through a luxury apartment complex in downtown Baymont. Both animated and clearly comfortable with each other's presence. Another photo showed them embracing in the parking structure while a woman in a business suit, presumably their realtor, waited discreetly by the elevator. When were these taken? I asked, studying Derek's face in the images. He looked genuinely happy, more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Tuesday afternoon. According to the timestamps, this was during Derek's supposed systems upgrade meeting and Amber's critical project deadline. Brian's voice carried bitter satisfaction. The PI also confirmed they've submitted rental applications for a 2-bedroom unit in the Riverside Towers complex. Move-in date requested for December 1st. December 1st. Less than 4 weeks away. They weren't just planning to leave us. They had already secured their future together and set a specific timeline for abandoning their engagements. There's more, Brian continued, pulling out his phone. I've been monitoring Amber's credit card activity through our joint account. Yesterday she made a significant purchase at Heritage Home Furnishings. When I called pretending to follow up on a delivery inquiry, they confirmed she'd ordered custom furniture for a 2-bedroom apartment. I felt coldness settle in my stomach. They're not just planning anymore. They're actively building a life together while lying to our faces every single day. The PI also tracked their communication patterns. Brian showed me a detailed report on his phone. They're not just texting, they're using a private messaging app called Secure Chat that automatically deletes conversations after 24 hours. But here's what they didn't know. The app keeps metadata, including message frequency and timestamps. He scrolled through the data. Derek and Amber were in constant contact, sometimes over 60 messages per day, usually starting around 6:15 a.m. when they woke up and continuing until nearly 11 p.m. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete emotional relationship happening parallel to their engagements. I absorbed this information while sipping my coffee. What about their work situation? Are they being careful there, or is their relationship obvious to colleagues? That's where it gets particularly interesting, Brian said. I reached out to someone I know in Nexus Digital's HR department, someone who owes me a professional favor from a previous consulting project. Apparently, Derek and Amber's relationship is an open secret in their division. People assume they're dating but separated or divorced and seeing each other. Nobody realizes they're both still engaged to other people. So they've been living as a couple professionally while maintaining their engagements privately, I said slowly. That explains why they were so comfortable at our anniversary party. Brian nodded grimly. They've created completely separate realities depending on their audience. I pulled out my own evidence folder. I've been tracking their financial coordination. Look at this. I showed Brian credit card statements and bank records I'd compiled. They've been splitting expenses for their apartment search, sharing costs for their romantic dinners, even coordinating gift purchases. Last month, Derek bought Amber an expensive bracelet for her birthday, the same day she transferred money to his account to cover half the cost. Brian studied the financial records with professional interest. They're operating like a married couple financially while still legally engaged to us. That creates interesting legal vulnerabilities, especially regarding asset commingling and the use of joint funds for extra relationship expenses. Meaning what exactly? Meaning they've been using engagement assets, money that legally belongs partially to us, to fund their affair relationship. Every dinner, every gift, every shared expense has been paid for with money that we have claims to. My attorney says that creates grounds for significant financial recovery in legal proceedings. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. They think they're being so sophisticated, but they've actually created a comprehensive evidence trail documenting their affair with forensic precision. Exactly, Brian said. And there's something else. The PI discovered they'd been meeting with a couples counselor. I stared at him. A couples counselor? They're in therapy together? Dr. Patricia Calloway on Elmwood Avenue. They've been seeing her twice a month for the past 9 weeks, working on what the appointment logs describe as communication skills and relationship transition planning. The audacity was stunning. While Derek and I struggled with growing distance in our relationship, he was in couples therapy with another woman, actively working on building a healthy partnership with her while our engagement deteriorated from his emotional absence. They're not just having an affair, I said slowly. They're building a complete foundation for a serious long-term relationship. The therapy, the apartment, the financial coordination, the professional integration. This is comprehensive life planning. Which brings us to the question of how we respond, Brian said. We could confront them now, armed with all this evidence. We could end our engagements immediately and use everything we've discovered to maximize legal advantages. Or I sensed there was another option. Brian smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, it wasn't a pleasant expression. Or we let them continue with their timeline while we prepare something more comprehensive. They want to surprise us with their revelations and walk away clean. I think we should surprise them instead. What are you thinking? They've scheduled their apartment move-in for December 1st. Based on their recent communication patterns, I think they're planning to tell us about their relationship that same weekend. Classic strategy, present the fait accompli when they're already established in their new life together. I nodded slowly. Maximum shock value, minimum opportunity for us to interfere with their plans. Exactly. But what if, when they sit us down for their carefully rehearsed speeches about finding true love and needing to end our engagements, we're already several steps ahead of them? Brian pulled out a legal pad covered with notes and timelines. My attorney suggests we prepare legal filings in advance, complete with asset protection orders and detailed evidence of their financial misconduct. We could have everything ready to file the moment they admit to the affair. Legal nuclear option, I said appreciatively. They expect tearful confrontations and emotional chaos. Instead, they get served with papers documenting everything they thought was secret. But that's just the legal response, Brian continued. I think we should consider the professional and social consequences too. They work for the same company where their relationship violates multiple corporate policies regarding disclosure and potential conflicts of interest. Their families and social circles have no idea they've been living double lives. I felt a surge of anticipation. You want to expose them comprehensively. Not just end the engagements, but ensure there are consequences across every area of their lives. I want them to understand that actions have repercussions beyond their personal convenience, Brian said firmly. They've spent almost a year manipulating and deceiving people who trusted them. They should face accountability that matches the scope of their deception. We spent the next 90 minutes outlining a comprehensive response strategy. Brian would coordinate with his attorney to prepare legal filings that could be executed immediately. I would compile evidence packages for Nexus Digital's HR department documenting Derek and Amber's undisclosed relationship and misuse of company resources for personal activities. But the centerpiece of our plan was something more psychologically satisfying. We would let them proceed with their revelation timeline, allowing them to sit us down and deliver their carefully prepared explanations about finding true love and needing to end our engagements. Then, instead of reacting with shock and devastation, we would calmly present them with evidence of everything we knew. I want to see their faces, Brian said quietly, when they realize we've known about their plans all along. When they understand that while they were congratulating themselves on their cleverness, we were documenting their every move. The psychological impact will be devastating, I agreed. They've built their entire strategy around our ignorance. Discovering that we've been actively investigating them while maintaining perfect facades will shatter their sense of control. Before we could finalize our timeline, I needed to implement something that had been forming in my mind since Tuesday. A way to apply psychological pressure that would make them increasingly paranoid while we maintained our cover. I have an idea for a preliminary operation, I told Brian. Something that will test their security and make them question whether their secret is as safe as they believe. Brian leaned forward with interest. What do you have in mind? The weekend after our strategic planning session, I implemented what Brian and I privately called Phase 1. Derek had mentioned on Friday evening that he'd be working Saturday afternoon, a critical system maintenance window that required his presence at the office. I knew from our PI surveillance that Derek and Amber typically spent Saturday afternoons at their future apartment in Baymont, supposedly reviewing furnishing options but actually playing house in their soon-to-be home. Saturday at 2:15 p.m., I called Derek's cell phone. He answered on the fourth ring, and I could hear Amber's voice in the background before he moved to a quieter location. Hey, honey, everything okay? His voice carried forced casualness. Derek, I'm so sorry to interrupt your work, but something strange just happened. I kept my tone concerned but not panicked. I got a call from Nexus Digital's security department. They said there's been some kind of network breach attempt and they're trying to verify which employees are actually in the building versus working remotely. They wanted to confirm your location. Silence. Then, a network breach? I haven't heard anything about that. That's what I thought was odd. The woman on the phone seemed very concerned about verifying everyone's whereabouts for security protocol purposes. She said she'd be calling your direct office line in the next 10 minutes to confirm. Another pause, longer this time. Actually, I just remembered, I stepped out for a quick lunch break. Needed to grab something before the maintenance window starts. Oh, where'd you go? In case they ask me for details. Just, downtown. Quick sandwich. I'll be back at the office in 15 minutes. Okay, well, I hope everything's alright with the security situation. Love you. I hung up and immediately texted Brian, Phase 1 executed. Target is rattled. His response came within seconds, Phase 1B initiating now. Brian had his own conversation to have with Amber. According to our plan, he would call her around the same time, mentioning that Nexus Digital had contacted him as an emergency contact because they couldn't reach her directly and there was an urgent security matter requiring immediate attention from all project coordinators. The beauty of our approach was its simplicity. There was no actual security breach, no real emergency. But Derek and Amber, caught in their Saturday afternoon together when they were supposed to be in separate locations doing separate activities, would be forced to scramble, coordinate their stories, and question whether their secret was compromised. By 3 p.m., our PI confirmed that both Derek's car and Amber's vehicle had left the Riverside Towers parking structure in Baymont and were heading in different directions, presumably back to their respective, legitimate, locations. Sunday morning, I implemented Phase 2. I posted a series of Instagram stories showing my activities throughout the day. First, a photo of morning coffee with the caption, "Quiet Sunday while Derek handles work emergencies." Such dedication to his career. Then, around 11 a.m., I posted a picture of myself at Harborside Athletic Club, the same gym where Brian worked out, and conveniently located directly across the street from Amber's apartment building. The location tag and timestamp would be visible to anyone in our social networks, including Derek's co-workers who followed me. "Beautiful morning for a workout," I captioned the photo, which clearly showed Amber's building in the background. "Exploring new neighborhoods in Crescent Bay." I followed this with a final story at noon showing the view from the gym's parking lot, a scenic shot that happened to include the entrance to Amber's building and the coffee shop where Derek and Amber frequently met for their morning rendezvous. To casual observers, it would look like innocent documentation of my Sunday activities. To Derek and Amber, it would look like evidence that I'd been near their secret meeting places, possibly watching them without their knowledge. Derek came home that afternoon visibly shaken. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Wonderful. Tried that new gym in Harborside. The facilities are excellent." I smiled innocently. "I took some photos, the neighborhood has such beautiful architecture." I posted a few on Instagram. Trevor's face paled slightly as he pulled out his phone, undoubtedly checking my posts. "Harborside? That's not your usual area. I like exploring different parts of Crescent Bay. You never know what interesting things you might discover." I paused, watching his reaction. "Why? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. Just, surprised you'd go all the way to Harborside." "Well, a friend recommended it. Said the area has great energy." I returned to my book, leaving him to process the implications. That evening, Derek spent over an hour in his study making hushed phone calls. Through the door, I could hear tense fragments of conversation. "Too close, need to be more careful, maybe we should slow down." Brian reported similar results from his end. Amber had come home Sunday evening visibly stressed, spent excessive time on her phone, and suggested they take a spontaneous weekend trip out of town, her way of running from the mounting pressure. Phase 1 had accomplished exactly what we intended. Derek and Amber were becoming paranoid, questioning their security, adjusting their routines. But more importantly, they were making mistakes. Monday brought confirmation that our strategy was working. Our PI followed them after Derek's supposed late meeting and observed something revealing. Instead of going to their usual restaurant or apartment, they drove to a completely different part of Crescent Bay and spent 30 minutes in Derek's car having what appeared to be an intense discussion in a grocery store parking lot. "Damage control meeting," Brian said when I met him Tuesday morning. "They're trying to figure out whether their security is compromised." "Which means they're no longer operating from confidence and control," I replied. "They're reactive, defensive, and increasingly paranoid." "Exactly. And people questioning their security tend to make changes to their normal patterns. Changes create new opportunities for observation and evidence gathering." We spent the next hour refining our approach for the remaining weeks before December 1st. If Derek and Amber were going to Baymont for their apartment move-in, we needed to maintain pressure without tipping them off to our complete knowledge. One more psychological operation, I suggested. Something that makes them believe their workplace might be investigating them. Brian smiled. "I think I know exactly what to do." Wednesday afternoon, Brian arranged for a colleague from another financial firm to visit Nexus Digital's offices, posing as a potential client interested in their services. During the visit, the colleague made casual comments about company culture, workplace relationships, and professional ethics policies, all while in the reception area where Derek and Amber would likely see or hear about the visit. The colleague also asked pointed questions about how Nexus handled interpersonal relationship disclosures among employees working on joint projects. Nothing overtly accusatory, but enough to make anyone with something to hide extremely nervous. By Thursday, Derek was noticeably on edge. He came home early, claimed he wasn't feeling well, and spent the evening obsessively checking his work email and phone. Is everything okay at work? I asked with genuine-sounding concern. You seem stressed. Just the usual corporate politics, he muttered. Nothing to worry about. But he was worried. They both were. And every hour they spent questioning their security, adjusting their plans, and making nervous decisions was another hour we were building our comprehensive response. Brian texted me Thursday evening, they're breaking. Another week of pressure and they'll be desperate enough to accelerate their timeline. I replied, good. Desperate people make poor decisions. Let's give them one more week, then let them proceed with their revelation. Because that's what we've been building toward all along. Not just exposing their affair, but ensuring that when they finally sat us down to confess and announce their plans, we would be so thoroughly prepared that their carefully rehearsed revelations would become their complete undoing. Derek and Amber had spent 11 months believing they were the intelligent ones, the strategic ones, the ones controlling the situation. In 2 more weeks, they would learn exactly how wrong they had been. And the education was going to be both comprehensive and absolutely devastating. The call came on Wednesday evening, exactly 2 weeks after Brian and I had begun our coordinated campaign. I was reviewing quarterly budget reports when Derek entered our living room, his expression serious but carefully composed. He sat across from me, hands clasped together, wearing the same earnest look he'd used when discussing major decisions during our early relationship years. Rachel, we need to have a serious conversation. There's something important I need to tell you. I set down my papers, arranging my face in appropriate concern. Of course. What's wrong? You look worried. Derek took a deep breath, and I recognized the moment he'd probably been rehearsing for weeks. This is going to be difficult to hear, and I want you to know that I never intended for things to develop this way. Derek, you're scaring me. What's going on? I've been doing a lot of thinking about our engagement, about who we've become as individuals, about what we both need to be truly fulfilled. His voice carried practiced sincerity. We've grown apart over the years, and I think we both recognize that we're not the same people we were when I proposed at Sunset Point. I leaned forward, my expression shifting to appropriate alarm. Are you saying you want to end our engagement? I'm saying that I think we both deserve to be with people who truly understand us at this stage of our lives, who bring out the best in who we are now, not who we were 5 years ago. Derek's rehearsed speech continued smoothly. I've met someone, Rachel. Someone who makes me feel more alive and authentic than I've felt in years. The moment hung in the air, Derek waiting for shock, tears, or emotional collapse. Instead, I sat quietly for several seconds, then reached for my phone with steady hands. That's interesting timing, I said calmly, scrolling through my contacts. Brian and I were just discussing the same topic. Derek's carefully composed expression cracked slightly. Brian? Brian Pierce? Brian Pierce. Amber's fiancé. You remember Brian, don't you? You attended his engagement party 8 months ago. Gave them that beautiful crystal wine decanter, if I recall correctly. The color drained from Derek's face as I found Brian's number and pressed call. The phone rang once before he answered. Hello, Rachel. Is it time? It's time, I confirmed, watching Derek's growing comprehension with quiet satisfaction. Derek just delivered his prepared speech about meeting someone who makes him feel alive. Shall we proceed with our response? Absolutely. Amber should be arriving at your place any moment now. Derek stared at me in growing horror. What's happening? What do you mean Amber's coming here? I ended the call and smiled at my fiancé with genuine warmth for the first time in weeks. Oh, Derek. Did you really think Brian and I wouldn't figure out what our partners were doing? Did you honestly believe we'd never compare notes about your lies? As if summoned by perfect timing, the doorbell rang. I stood gracefully and walked to the front door, opening it to reveal Amber's shocked face. Behind her, Brian's car was pulling into our driveway. Amber, how wonderful to see you again so soon after our anniversary party. Please come in. Derek is in the living room, and I believe you two had something you wanted to discuss with Brian and me. Amber looked between me and Derek, her composure beginning to fracture. I don't understand. Why is Brian here? How did you know about your affair? I finished pleasantly. About your couple's therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Calloway? About your apartment applications for Riverside Towers in Baymont? About your 11-month relationship that began while you were both engaged to other people? Brian entered behind Amber, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of cold professionalism that would have been appropriate in a boardroom negotiation. Good evening, Derek. Amber. I think we have quite a bit to discuss. Derek stood slowly, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and dawning realization. How long have you known? We've known since your anniversary party 2 weeks ago, Brian replied, settling into an armchair with deliberate calm. The question isn't how long we've known. The question is how thoroughly we've documented your activities since then. I returned to my seat, opening my laptop with practiced ease. 2 weeks, Derek. 2 weeks of watching you lie to my face while you and Amber finalized your romantic future together. 2 weeks of documenting every restaurant charge, every secret meeting, every text message coordination, every apartment viewing. Amber sank onto the couch beside Derek, her hands trembling slightly. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. You didn't mean to get caught, Brian corrected sharply. You meant for it to happen exactly this way. Surprise your partners with simultaneous revelations, present us with accomplished facts, and walk away clean into your new life together. I turned my laptop screen toward them, displaying the comprehensive timeline Brian and I had constructed. 11 months of systematic deception. From your first dinner at Giovanni's Italian Kitchen to your furniture order at Heritage Home Furnishings last week. Every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar of engagement assets you spent on each other. Derek's voice was barely audible. How did you get all this? Phone records, credit card statements, location data, social media analysis, private investigation services, and 2 weeks of active surveillance. Brian's tone was matter-of-fact. Once we started working together and sharing information, the scope of your deception became quite clear. Amber looked up sharply. Working together? You two have been coordinating? Coordinating our investigation while you coordinated your affair, I replied. The difference is that our coordination included legal preparation, evidence compilation, and professional consultation. Your coordination apparently consisted of choosing furniture for your Baymont apartment and scheduling couples therapy sessions. Brian opened his briefcase and pulled out several thick folders. Speaking of legal preparation, these are engagement dissolution filings for both relationships, complete with asset protection orders and detailed evidence of financial misconduct. They're ready to be submitted tomorrow morning. You can't be serious, Derek said, his voice rising with panic. We're completely serious, I replied. But that's just the legal response. Brian, would you like to share what we've prepared regarding professional consequences? Brian's smile held no warmth. Certainly. Tomorrow morning, Nexus Digital's HR department will receive a comprehensive report documenting Derek and Amber's undisclosed romantic relationship. This includes evidence of policy violations regarding personal relationships between employees, misuse of company resources for personal activities, fraudulent expense reporting, and failure to disclose potential conflicts of interest. Amber's face went white. You can't do that. Our careers. Your careers will face appropriate consequences for your professional conduct, Brian interrupted, just as your engagements are facing appropriate consequences for your personal conduct. I leaned forward, my voice gentle but implacable. Derek, you stood in this room 20 minutes ago and told me you'd met someone who made you feel alive. You spoke about deserving to be with people who truly understand us. I agree completely with that sentiment. Rachel, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Rebuild trust after 11 months of systematic deception? I shook my head. Recover from the discovery that you've been living a completely separate life while I supported you emotionally and financially? No, Derek. What we can do is proceed with dignity and appropriate consequences. Brian addressed Amber directly. You told me 3 weeks ago that you were excited about our spring wedding, that you'd been looking at honeymoon destinations in the Greek islands. While you were saying those words, you were planning to leave me for another man. The level of calculation involved is breathtaking. Amber's composure finally broke completely. We didn't want to hurt anyone. We tried to end it multiple times, but we couldn't. We love each other. You love each other so much that you built your relationship on lies, deception, and betrayal of the people who trusted you most, I said quietly. That's not love, Amber. That's selfishness with romantic packaging. Derek made one last attempt at damage control. What do you want from us? What would it take for you to reconsider the legal and professional actions? Brian and I exchanged a look of perfect understanding. We had anticipated this moment, this attempt to negotiate away consequences. We want you to experience appropriate accountability for your choices, Brian said simply. For 11 months, you've enjoyed the benefits of your affair while avoiding any real consequences. You've used our homes, our emotional support, our financial resources, and our trust to sustain your relationship. Now you get to build your relationship honestly. Without the safety net of engagements you were planning to abandon anyway, I continued. Without the professional positions you compromised through your conduct. Without the social connections you maintained through deception. I closed my laptop and stood. Your belongings are packed and waiting in the garage, Derek. The locks have been changed, and you're no longer welcome in this house. Engagement dissolution papers will be filed tomorrow morning, along with the HR complaint at Nexus Digital. Brian stood as well. Amber, your belongings are in my car. I've arranged for you to stay at your sister's house in Westport until you make permanent arrangements. Our joint accounts have been frozen, and our attorneys will handle all future communication. Derek and Amber sat frozen on the couch, the weight of complete exposure and coordinated consequences finally settling on them. Their carefully planned revelation had become their complete undoing. This is happening too fast, Amber whispered. Can't we at least discuss? You had 11 months to discuss your choices, Brian interrupted. You chose deception, manipulation, and betrayal. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. I walked to the front door and opened it pointedly. Your new life together starts now. Honestly this time, without the benefit of deceiving anyone else. As Derek and Amber gathered themselves to leave, Derek made one final attempt. Rachel, 5 years of being engaged has to count for something. I looked at him with genuine sadness for the first time since our anniversary party. 5 years did count for something, Derek. It counted enough for me to fight for the truth and ensure that your actions had appropriate consequences. But it doesn't count enough to excuse 11 months of calculated betrayal. They left together, walking toward Brian's car where Amber's belongings waited. Through the window, I watched them drive away into their new life of complete honesty and full accountability. Brian and I stood in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of weeks of planning and preparation. The systematic exposure was complete. The legal machinery was in motion. Two people who had spent almost a year believing they were smarter than everyone else had discovered exactly how wrong they had been. How do you feel? Brian asked quietly. Satisfied, I replied honestly. Not happy, not vindicated, but satisfied that justice was served proportional to the betrayal. Same here. They got exactly what they chose, just not in the way they expected. Brian began gathering his materials to leave, but paused at the door. Rachel, there's something I need to say. When this started 2 weeks ago, I was looking for an ally to help me through a devastating situation. But working with you these past weeks, I've discovered someone whose intelligence, integrity, and strategic thinking I genuinely respect and admire. I felt unexpected warmth at his words. Derek and Amber inadvertently introduced us. Their betrayal destroyed 2 engagements, but it also revealed the kind of person I could trust in the most difficult circumstances. That's an outcome none of us planned for, Brian said thoughtfully. But perhaps it's the one that matters most. After Brian left, I walked through my townhouse, noting all the spaces Derek had occupied. His study where he'd made those hushed phone calls to Amber. The kitchen where he'd kissed my cheek each morning while planning his exit. The living room where he'd just delivered his rehearsed speech about finding true love. Tomorrow, the legal consequences would begin. The HR investigation would commence. Their colleagues, friends, and families would learn the truth about how Derek and Amber had conducted themselves. But tonight, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph or revenge, but a strange sense of liberation. Derek's betrayal had forced me to discover capabilities I never knew I possessed. His deception had revealed my capacity for strategic thinking, coordinated planning, and maintaining composure under extreme pressure. I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to a headhunter I'd been speaking with about a senior consulting position. For months, I'd hesitated to pursue the opportunity because Derek had claimed he needed stability in his career and couldn't handle the stress of my transition. Now I realized those concerns had never been about us. They'd been about his need to maintain his double life without additional complications. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. "Thank you for tonight. For everything these past 2 weeks. You gave me the strength to face this situation with dignity instead of desperation." I replied, "We gave each other that strength. That's what real partnership looks like." His response came quickly, "Agreed. And Rachel? When enough time has passed, and if you're interested, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as allies or co-conspirators, but as two people who might enjoy getting to know each other without the weight of betrayal hanging over us." I smiled at my phone. "I'd like that. But let's give ourselves time to heal first. We both deserve to rebuild as individuals before we consider anything else." Wise as always. "Good night, Rachel." As I prepared for bed, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in 2 weeks. The woman who had celebrated her engagement anniversary believing in her relationship's strength no longer existed. In her place was someone harder but wiser, more strategic but also more authentic. Derek had unwittingly given me an extraordinary gift, the opportunity to discover my own strength and intelligence under pressure. His betrayal had forced me to develop skills I never knew I possessed and revealed capabilities I might never have discovered otherwise. Tomorrow would bring consequences, complications, and the messy reality of dissolved engagements. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that Friday evening 2 weeks ago. Genuine peace. Derek and Amber wanted to start a new life together based on destroying other people's trust. Instead, they would start it with everyone knowing exactly what kind of people they really were. They would start it facing professional consequences, legal complications, and social accountability. Most importantly, they would start it knowing that their victims had been far more intelligent and resourceful than they had ever imagined. Justice, it turned out, had a satisfaction all its own. And sometimes, the best response to betrayal wasn't revenge, it was ensuring that actions met their appropriate consequences while maintaining your own integrity throughout the process. I fell asleep that night in my townhouse, in my bed, in my life that was finally and completely my own. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would be challenges I faced on my terms, with the knowledge that I was far stronger than I'd ever known. Derek and Amber had underestimated me. That had been their fatal mistake. And they would spend a very long time understanding just how costly that mistake had been. 7 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new condominium in Harbor Heights, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Crescent Bay Marina. The space was modern, open, and entirely mine, purchased with the settlement funds from my dissolved engagement and decorated according to nobody's preferences but my own. No shared memories, no tainted associations, just clean possibilities stretching forward into a future I was actively creating. The legal proceedings had concluded exactly as Brian and I had strategized. Derek's attempt to contest the engagement dissolution had collapsed when faced with 11 months of documented evidence. His attorney had advised him to accept the settlement terms rather than risk a formal hearing that would expose the full scope of his financial misconduct and professional ethics violations. The asset division had favored me significantly, particularly after the mediator reviewed evidence of Derek using joint engagement funds to support his relationship with Amber. Derek and Amber's professional consequences had been swift and comprehensive. Nexus Digital had terminated both of them within 3 weeks of receiving our detailed HR complaint. Their violations of company policies regarding undisclosed relationships, conflicts of interest, misuse of resources, and fraudulent expense reporting had given the company clear legal grounds for dismissal without severance packages. The terminations had sent ripples through Crescent Bay's professional community, and the circumstances, though not explicitly detailed in official statements, had become common knowledge through workplace networks. Derek had eventually found employment at a smaller technology firm in Westport, but at a considerable reduction in salary, responsibility, and professional standing. Amber had struggled more visibly, her reputation in Crescent Bay's project management circles damaged beyond easy repair. She'd relocated to her sister's city 3 hours away, starting over professionally and personally in a place where her history wasn't immediately known. But the most predictable consequence had been watching their relationship crumble under the pressure of reality. Building a romance on deception, shared guilt, and the thrill of forbidden connection had proven unsustainable when forced into the harsh light of honesty and public accountability. According to mutual acquaintances who still occasionally provided updates, Derek and Amber had lasted less than 5 months living together openly in their Baymont apartment. Without the excitement of secrecy, the validation of successfully deceiving their partners, and the fantasy of a perfect future untainted by consequences, their connection had revealed itself as exactly what it was: superficial attraction and mutual selfishness masquerading as profound love. Derek had moved to a studio apartment in Westport shortly after their relationship ended. Amber, from what I'd heard, was dating someone new but struggling with trust issues that apparently stemmed from her own capacity for deception. Their grand romance, the relationship they'd claimed was worth destroying 2 engagements and multiple careers, had collapsed the moment it faced real-world pressures without the foundation of genuine compatibility or shared values. I sipped my morning coffee, reviewing emails on my tablet. My consulting business had grown beyond my initial projections, fueled partly by the professional network I'd developed through the dissolution proceedings and partly by my own demonstrated capabilities in strategic analysis and problem-solving. Clients sought me out specifically for my ability to see patterns others missed and develop comprehensive solutions to complex situations. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek's betrayal had inadvertently launched not just my personal transformation but a thriving career that utilized exactly the skills I'd developed while investigating his affair. His deception had forced me to become a better analyst, a more strategic thinker, and a more confident professional than I might have become otherwise. My phone chimed with a text from Brian: "Lunch at Meridian Bistro at noon? I have news to share." I smiled and replied, "See you there." Brian and I had maintained our friendship throughout the past 7 months, though we'd been careful to give each other space for individual healing and growth. What had begun as an alliance born of mutual betrayal had evolved into something genuine, a friendship built on shared experience, mutual respect, and authentic connection rather than crisis management. I arrived at Meridian Bistro to find Brian already waiting at a corner table. But he wasn't alone. A woman with warm brown eyes and an easy smile sat across from him, and the comfortable way they interacted suggested this wasn't their first meeting. "Rachel, I'd like you to meet Dr. Jennifer Matthews," Brian said as I approached. "Jennifer, this is Rachel Winters, the friend I've told you about." Jennifer extended her hand warmly. "Brian speaks of you with tremendous respect and gratitude. I've been looking forward to meeting the woman who helped him navigate such a difficult situation with such grace and intelligence." As we settled into conversation over lunch, I learned that Jennifer was a research scientist who had recently relocated to Crescent Bay to lead a marine biology program at the university. She and Brian had met through a professional networking event 3 months ago, and their relationship had developed naturally, built on shared interests, honest communication, and genuine compatibility rather than workplace proximity and forbidden attraction. "Jennifer knows everything about what happened with Amber," Brian said quietly. "Complete transparency from the beginning. No secrets, no gradual revelations, no hidden information." "I appreciate how Brian handled his past," Jennifer said thoughtfully. "He told me early in our relationship that he'd been engaged before, that it ended due to his ex-fiancée's infidelity, and that he learned important lessons about the kind of relationship he wanted to build in the future. His honesty made me trust him even more." Brian reached across the table and took Jennifer's hand, and I noted the ease and authenticity of their connection. This wasn't performative affection or carefully calculated public displays. This was genuine partnership between 2 people who'd found each other after learning painful lessons about what real relationships required. "There's something else I wanted to share," Brian continued, his expression becoming more serious. "I've been approached by a publisher about writing a book about our experience, not a revenge story, but a practical guide for people facing relationship betrayal. A framework for responding strategically rather than emotionally, protecting yourself legally and financially while maintaining your dignity throughout the process." "That's a brilliant idea," I said immediately. So many people in our situation react with pure emotion and end up making decisions that hurt them in the long run. Having a systematic approach could help thousands of people protect themselves and their futures. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "Brian's approach was remarkable. The way you both handled such a devastating betrayal with intelligence and coordination instead of spite and chaos, that's genuinely valuable information that could help others." "The publisher wants to know if you'd be interested in co-authoring," Brian said, looking at me directly. "They think having both perspectives, how we discovered the affairs, how we found each other, how we coordinated our response, would create a more comprehensive and helpful resource." I considered the proposal, thinking about how Derek and Amber's betrayal could be transformed into something that genuinely helped people facing similar situations. "I think I'd be honored to work on that project with you." We spent the next hour discussing the potential book structure, the key lessons we'd learned, and the frameworks we developed for strategic response to relationship betrayal. Jennifer contributed insights from a psychological perspective, noting how our approach had focused on empowerment rather than victimization, on strategic thinking rather than emotional reaction. As lunch concluded and Jennifer excused herself to return to her lab, Brian walked me to my car. "Rachel, I need to tell you something. When this situation started 7 months ago, I was looking for an ally to help me survive devastation. But working with you, getting to know you, seeing your strength and intelligence, you became one of the most important people in my life." "You became that for me too," I replied honestly. "Derek's betrayal introduced us, but our friendship is built on so much more than shared trauma. Jennifer asked me recently if I'd ever considered whether you and I might become something more than friends," Brian said carefully. I told her the truth, that I value our friendship too much to risk it, and that I genuinely believe we work better as allies and collaborators than we would as romantic partners. I felt relief at his words, confirming what I'd instinctively known. "I feel exactly the same way. What we have is valuable precisely because it's not complicated by romantic expectations or relationship dynamics. We're better as friends." Agreed. Though I will say this, watching you rebuild your life these past months, seeing you launch your consulting business and reclaim your independence, has been inspiring. Whoever eventually earns your trust romantically will be incredibly fortunate. I smiled. "The same goes for you. Jennifer seems wonderful, by the way. I'm genuinely happy for you both. She is wonderful. And she's wonderful partly because our relationship started from a place of complete honesty. No secrets, no performance, no hidden agendas. That's what I learned from the situation with Amber, that real relationships require authentic foundations." Driving back to my condominium, I reflected on how dramatically my life had transformed in 7 months. The woman who had hosted an engagement anniversary celebration believing in her relationship's permanence no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood her own capabilities, who valued authentic connection over comfortable deception, who had learned that strength often emerged from adversity. That evening, I received an email from Atlantic Publishing Group with a formal book proposal. The advance they offered was substantial, but more importantly, the project represented an opportunity to transform Derek and Amber's betrayal into something genuinely valuable, a resource that could help others protect themselves from similar manipulation and emerge from betrayal with dignity intact. I opened a new document and began drafting an outline. The title came to me immediately: Strategic Response, Transforming Betrayal into Empowerment Through Coordinated Action. Derek and Amber had wanted to start a new life together based on destroying other people's trust and commitments. Instead, they had inadvertently launched Brian and me toward creating something meaningful, a practical guide that would help future victims of relationship betrayal protect themselves, coordinate responses, and emerge stronger rather than broken. The irony was exquisite. Their selfishness and deception would become the foundation for helping others avoid being victimized by similar behavior. Their betrayal would be transformed into protection for countless people facing the same devastating discovery. As I wrote late into the evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before that Friday night 7 months ago, genuine excitement about the future. Not because I had punished those who wronged me, though appropriate consequences had certainly been served. Not because I had achieved some grand revenge, though justice had been proportional to the betrayal. But because I had discovered capabilities within myself that might have remained dormant otherwise. Derek's deception had forced me to become more analytical, more strategic, more confident, and more authentically powerful than I had been before. His betrayal had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, a complete understanding of my own strength. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Rachel, this is Derek. I know I have no right to contact you, but I wanted you to know that I understand now how badly I hurt you. The past months have been difficult, and I've had time to reflect on my choices and their consequences. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for several long minutes, considering various responses. Part of me wanted to itemize exactly how his actions had affected me, to make him understand the full scope of damage his betrayal had caused. Another part wanted to ignore the message entirely, to deny him even the satisfaction of knowing I'd read his words. Instead, I typed a simple response: "I appreciate the apology. I am doing well, better than well, actually. I hope you're learning from your experiences and making better choices. Take care of yourself." Then I blocked the number. Not out of anger or bitterness, but because there was simply nothing more to say. Derek belonged to a chapter of my life that had closed completely. His apology, while perhaps genuine, couldn't change the past and didn't affect my future. I returned to my book outline, channeling 7 months of experience, learning, and growth into something that could genuinely help others. The chapter headings emerged naturally: initial discovery and evidence gathering, finding allies and building support networks, strategic planning and coordinated response, legal protection and financial security, confrontation and consequence management, recovery and personal transformation. Each chapter would include practical frameworks, specific strategies, and lessons learned from both Brian's and my experiences. But more importantly, the book would emphasize something crucial: that responding to betrayal with intelligence rather than emotion didn't mean suppressing feelings, but rather channeling them into productive action that protected your interests and ensured appropriate accountability. Around midnight, I saved my outline and walked to my condominium's balcony. The lights of Crescent Bay sparkled below, boats bobbing gently in the marina, the city alive with possibilities I was only beginning to explore. 7 months ago, I had stood at an engagement anniversary party, discovering that the man I'd planned to marry was living a complete double life. That discovery could have destroyed me, could have left me broken and bitter, could have defined me as a victim of someone else's selfishness. Instead, it had revealed capabilities I never knew I possessed. It had introduced me to people whose integrity and intelligence I genuinely admired. It had launched a career that utilized my analytical skills and strategic thinking. It had taught me that authentic strength came not from avoiding pain, but from facing it with clear eyes and purposeful action. Derek had been right about one thing during his rehearsed speech 7 months ago: we both deserved to be with people who brought out the best in who we were. The difference was that I had discovered the best in myself not through a new relationship, but through facing his betrayal with intelligence, coordination, and unwavering commitment to appropriate consequences. That was a gift no amount of deception could ever diminish. As I looked out over Crescent Bay, I felt genuine gratitude, not for Derek's betrayal itself, but for what I had become in response to it. Stronger, wiser, more authentic, and more capable than I had ever been before. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities I was actively creating rather than passively accepting. My consulting business was thriving. My friendship with Brian was genuine and valuable. My book project would help others facing similar betrayals. My life was authentically, completely, and wonderfully my own. Derek and Amber had wanted to write a love story based on deception and betrayal. Instead, they had inadvertently helped me write a story about transformation, empowerment, and the discovery of genuine strength. And that story, my story, was only just beginning. The best revenge, it turned out, truly was living well. Not living well to spite someone else or prove them wrong, but living well because you'd discovered your own worth, developed your own capabilities, and claimed your own authentic power. Derek and Amber would spend years recovering from the consequences of their choices, rebuilding careers and reputations they damaged through calculated deception. Their grand romance had collapsed under the weight of reality, leaving them both diminished and alone. Meanwhile, I stood on my balcony in my beautiful condominium, planning a book that would help others, building a business that utilized my strengths, and looking forward to a future I was consciously designing rather than unconsciously accepting. They had underestimated me completely. That had been their fatal mistake. And I would spend the rest of my life proving just how costly that mistake had been, not through bitterness or revenge, but through success, authenticity, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived on my own terms. The lights of Crescent Bay twinkled below, and somewhere in that sprawling city, Derek and Amber were living with the consequences of their choices. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow's consulting meeting, next week's book planning session with Brian, and the hundreds of small decisions that would shape my future into something extraordinary. The engagement anniversary party 7 months ago had marked the end of one chapter. Tonight marked the confident beginning of another. And this chapter would be written entirely on my terms, in my voice, telling a story of transformation that no betrayal could ever diminish. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.